Good to be here this morning. We were out and about yesterday, and it rained cats and dogs. And it's been rainy all week, so I got up this morning and looked out as the sun came up, and it was nice to see sunshine shining across everything again this morning. Some blue skies again. I don't know. Open your Bibles this morning to Matthew chapter 6. Matthew chapter 6. Stop being mean to that baby. Matthew chapter 6. We're going to read very familiar scripture this morning. Very familiar. But I don't know. I remember hearing this as a child. And I don't know, there's a lot of things, and it's weird because I never thought much about them through the first 3 decades of my life. And the older that I get, the more I'm remembering about the first decade of my life. Has that happened to anybody else, where you just start recalling things that, I remember having that thought. Where's that been for 35 years? But I'll read scripture, and I'll remember the thought that I had about, like, my understanding of what that thought was when I was a kid. Grew up in church, so I listened to preaching my entire life. Heard lots and lots and lots of preaching from a lot of different perspectives of people too. And I remember hearing things preached and thinking a thought to myself about, well, if that's this way, then what does this mean over here? And a lot of it was childish misunderstanding, you understand what I'm saying, but just the thoughts a kid has, and trying to put together pieces of reality with their limited understanding. We should never forget that these kids here are doing the same thing. And so it ought to make us a little more cautious and not so shooting from the hip with just wild and speech, so to speak. I think about it even doing Sunday school sometimes, and the little ones, they ain't in here when we do this, but still, all your words matter. And to just get wound up in emotion or feelings and just, let rip with a big long string of something that don't make sense to nobody but you in your own mind could cause a lot more stumbling blocks for people in general, but especially kids. Because they hear things, and it's just like, I don't know, I watch little Libby, and, I'm watching her grow up. And kids reach a certain milestone in their life where they turn a corner. It's not any specific incident that takes place. You just notice suddenly they're more conscious and aware of what's going on. And, children in general are hungry for that kind of learning. They want to excel in those lanes, and so they're always trying to put together the pieces. But they still have a limited understanding because they just haven't lived long enough to know. And so we say things that make sense to us, and there's holes all in it for them because of their lack of understanding. The devil uses that big time to sow thoughts in their mind, and I'm not talking about thoughts of sin, I'm just talking about misdirecting their way of thinking. And they develop an understanding of something that they never say. It's just how they think. You don't never know it, and nor do I, until they're grown, and then all of a sudden they come out with something, you're like, where in the world did you hear that? Well, that's how I've always known. You taught it to me. What do you mean? You see? Anyway, this is one of those scriptures that I have heard all my life. We've read it, you've read it, I've read it. And very simple, Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Jesus said this, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal." Verse 20, "But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break through nor steal." Verse 21, "For where your treasure is, there will your heart be also." There's a lot of moving parts in those three little verses. It sounds really simple, just like a statement of fact. But there's some things to consider about it. Treasure. You know, how many movies have been made about treasure? The seeking of it, the hiding of it, the stealing of it, the making of it. You know, treasure. How much activity do you think that one word has initiated or inspired in this world? I mean, we have this thing called an economy. Well, not much of one left, I'll have to say. I think a lot of it's more imaginary than it is real at this point. But the whole world, there's our nation's economy, there's a global economy. That's why we're paying $5 a gallon for gas right now, because of the global economy. Supposedly. Treasures. It has driven men to do the best and worst things imaginable since the dawn of time. How much money has been spent in the pursuit of treasure? You say, well, treasure is money. Well, it can be. But there's a lot of people that spend their fortune looking for a treasure that they never find. Yeah. How many friendships have been sacrificed on the altar of treasure? Lots of them. Lots of them. How many homes have been broken over treasure? How many lives have been lost looking for treasure, hunting for it, trying to steal it, trying to make it, trying to take it from someone, trying to manage it, trying to control the treasure? What do you think the CIA is? Oh, mercy. How much betrayal for treasure? I mean, Judas betrayed the Son of God, and it wasn't a treasure he got. It was just 30 pieces of silver, but he did it for money. He did it for money. Treasure. You say, well, what would qualify as a treasure? I mean, in the general understanding or sense of the word of treasure, what qualifies as treasure? What's considered to be treasure? Well, if you look up the definition for it, it's pretty much what you would think in your mind. Treasure is accumulated wealth. Treasure is a great quantity of anything collected for future use. Remember that one, because that's a little more details than just accumulated wealth. It means great abundance. But that could go several different ways. In the context of a verb, as in an action, to treasure something means to hoard money or other things for future use. Well, like so many other words, we've changed the usage of it to mean something more heartfelt or sincere, like I treasure our friendship. But treasure has always been different than value, you see, because of what all comes along with treasure. Okay, I would say that you could make just about anything your treasure, wouldn't you? I mean, look around you. The list is endless of things that people put value on enough to treasure them. Treasure. I think it has a lot to do with the effort that you spend pursuing it as to whether or not you consider something to be a treasure or not. And what you're willing to replace in your life with it. Because that's what a lot of people do for treasure. I think that's why Jesus started out saying it the way he did, of saying, lay not up for yourself treasure on this earth. Why? Why not? Well, I mean, the obvious things, because moth and rust will literally rot it away. If somebody finds out you got a treasure, then all you do is look over your shoulder for the rest of your life. Spend half of it trying to protect it, and they're still going to come after it. Thieves break through and steal. That's what they do. I remember there's things that Grandpa has said through my life, just little sayings here and there, and one of them is this thing I heard you say when I was a kid, and he said that locks are only made to keep out honest thieves. That's the truth. I've never met somebody bent on stealing something that a lock did much to stop them. I mean, you know, you can take a hammer and break a master lock just pretty slick if you hit it just right. So what's a lock really for? Protection, or for you to deceive your own mind that you're protected? I've thought about that a lot of times. Well, I've seen some very worthless things be considered treasure by people. You know, we've all experienced a situation where somebody passes and it's your job to clean up and clean out their house or their shed or their things. And there's things that we've found that they saved for 60 years and they wouldn't throw it away. And it has zero value to anyone else on the face of the earth. And most of the time, most of it just gets thrown in a dumpster. It's very sad to me. You know, I'm dealing with a situation right now where I'm having to deal with somebody who puts a lot of value on worthless things, all based on memories about the people and those things that most of that wasn't even based in reality. So most of their sentimental feelings are literally based on things that didn't happen. It's very sad, to the point where it is dictating reality now. It's dictating what they do with their treasure now. And it's all based on things that are not true. Why? Because they laid up for themselves treasures on this earth. It was for them. Everyone's mind usually goes straight to our work when you hear the phrase laying up treasure. Lay not up for yourselves treasures on this earth. Well, like I said, everybody thinks, well, you work too much. Is that what he meant? Well, we've all known people that work too much, you know. No guy right now, and I mean, he probably works between 80 and 100 hours a week. And I mean, he's got a lot to show for it, but he ain't got no life. What good does all this treasure do you if you only ever just lay up treasure? I mean, it seems like a very, it is a vanity, but it seems almost like a cruel joke that you play on yourself. You've heard me say before when I worked there at my house at the shop for all them years, right there on 34 Highway. And all summer long, I'd watch these rigs go by, and here'd go an $80,000 pickup pulling about a $100,000 camper, and behind that would be a $40,000 boat or a side-by-side or something like that, and there they'd go. All that money rolling down the road. And I would think to myself for a second, I'd say, man, I wish I had time and those things to go and be able to do those things. And then I would immediately think, the guy driving that truck, this is probably one out of maybe 2 times this whole year that he's getting to go somewhere to do something with this rig. He owes forever for that outfit that is depreciating faster than he's getting any enjoyment out of it. His wife probably hates him. His kids probably don't talk to him. They're mad because there's no internet where they're going. And he's probably just as miserable as a man could be. And that's why he buys all this stuff, to try to be happy. Try to create a scenario where it feels like he's enjoying his treasure. And it's all like cotton candy. The first little bit of moisture that hits it, and it just melts to nothing. But it looks like something, but it's really not. So, is the pursuit of treasure, is it working? Well, no. Can it be? Of course. It all depends on, like I said, what it replaces in your life. Why is the main reason we think work? Okay, well, because it demands a lot of our time, for sure. But I will say this, most people only work a 40-hour week. There's a lot more than 40 hours in a week. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, 40 hours is just a fraction of the week. So is working laying up treasure? No. But that's one of the reasons why we feel that way. We think about it that way. Another reason, there's really not a way to avoid working. You got to. If you don't, somebody else has to work to provide for you. And I'm not just talking about children. There's many grown people walking around out here that's living on somebody else's dime. And it ain't just the government. There's a lot of, I see it so much more nowadays, and that's a whole nother ball of wax we could talk about, but there's a lot of parents that are elderly that are literally supporting their children and their grandchildren, raising them, supporting them, and I'm not talking about helping them out when they're down. I'm talking about paying for their life. I know some folks right now, they have 2 adult sons that have families and have had for years. And them boys don't pay a mortgage because their mom and daddy bought the farms that they live on and then just said, you can live there. There you go. And I guess feeling like they're doing them a real favor. But man, them boys' life is a mess. Why? Because somebody else is paying for their life. There's no honor in that. Does it make their life easier because they don't got to pay a mortgage? Maybe in the aspect of money. But you know what they have instead? Payments for big bass boats and all kinds of toys. Because why? Because their life has been facilitated by someone else. You think their parents are happy? No, I know them, and they're not. They're disappointed because they thought doing this for their sons would make their life better than what theirs was. And it set them up to just destroy their life. It really did. It really is currently as we speak. It's not right to avoid working. And that can be 1,000 different things. But the Bible says if a man would not work, neither should he eat. And ain't nobody missing no meals. So what I'm trying to build a foundation for here is that working is not necessarily laying up treasure for yourself on the earth. There's some variables, unless such and such, and we'll get to that. But, people have commitments and obligations. That's work is not avoidable. And it demands a lot of our time. And then there's commitments and obligations. You have a family, you have a wife, a family, you have obligations. You sign that mortgage, you have an obligation. You've made a commitment. And I believe that a righteous man honors his commitments. It's not right to welch. It would be smarter to not have debt, because the Bible kind of addresses that before it does welching. But if you have debt, which most of us do, it's about unavoidable in the world we live in now. But you honor that. And you do that by working and by being diligent and being a good steward of what you make and paying your bills, paying your debts. It's wrong to not pay your debts. It is. And so because of commitments and obligations and just the way that life is, work is just... I've joked around before and told people that, in the garden when man sinned, Eve had to have children and Adam had to work. So that's your curse, and then there's my curse. I got to work. But it's funny how the Lord has designed things so that, I enjoy working. I always have. I like to work. I like to be productive. I like to be creative. I am not happy just loafing around for longer than a vacation. And seriously, I mean, ask her what happens on rainy days, what happens when I can't go to work. Used to be a lot worse when she was at home all the time, and I'd get rained out, and then I'd just be in the house. And then she was ready for me to go back to work because I need to work. I need to work. I want to. So, is it biblical or based on biblical principle to be ambitious and have a vision for the future? Saving and investing your money? Having a good work ethic and being a hard worker, an honest man, honest worker? Is being a good provider? Is all those things, are they biblical? Yes, they are. You say, yeah, but a lot of people take those and, they run the other way with them. They start using those things to lay up treasure for themselves on this earth. But it is not unbiblical to save your money. It's not unbiblical to invest in things that will make, what do you think the parable of the men with the talents was? He gave them a little, they went and made it into a lot and gave it back to him. Was that for them? No, it was for the master. See? That's why the guy that didn't do anything with the little that he had was the unprofitable servant. It is biblical to be a good provider and for that to be a feeling of responsibility on your shoulders. And it's not just for the men. There's things that mothers and wives provide for the family that the fathers can't. We all have things that we provide, that we bring to the table. In the same way that we ought to have something that we bring to church. I was talking to a boy this week, and that's what I told him. I said, a lot of people go to church in order to have a relationship with God and a spiritual life. And I said, you're supposed to have that and bring it to church, not the other way around. You don't come here to get it. This ain't Christian Walmart. You bring your offering. And what do you think it is? Treasures? No. Is it biblical and based on biblical principle? The answer is yes, of course it is. And there's many examples of men in the Bible who were these things. Abraham, you've been talking on Sunday nights preaching about Jacob. And you started with Abraham and come all the way through. Them men were not poor. Them men had a lot. Now, did they have wagons full of gold bullion? No. What did they do? Well, they were ranchers by trade, mostly. And all of their money, their wealth, was tied up in assets and things that they worked at all the time. They never stopped working to the end. There wasn't no such thing as retirement, I don't reckon. But they all had wealth that they were always working on. Where was God in all of that? Oh, he was very much involved in it. What was the prayer that Jacob prayed the other night that you read there where he said, all these things that you have blessed me with? So he knew where it came from. Always did. But did that alter the trajectory of his goals for what he did? No, he continued to work and keep multiplying. How about, there was Abraham and Jacob that we mentioned. What about Joseph? His circumstance was very different. However, when he got in the right position, what did he do? He laid back. He laid back for the 7 years of famine. Was that his idea? No. God gave that to him in interpretation of the dream of Pharaoh. And what was the answer for the salvation of that whole part of the world? Saving. Working harder. Laying back. Everybody pitching in. There was a system that he had that got him through the 7 years of famine. And it wasn't just living in the moment. And it wasn't just, the scarcity mindset. Spend it while you got it. because it's all going to be gone tomorrow. You know, let us eat this bread, and for tomorrow we die. No, there had to be more thought and more effort purposely and intentionally put into this for everyone to survive. David the king, he wanted to build the Lord a temple, and the Lord said, you can't. He said, well, can I save up all the stuff for it? And he said, yeah. So that's what he spent the rest of his life doing, is collecting cedars from Lebanon and gold and silver and all of the things that Solomon would need to build the temple. Why? For the future. Was it treasures for himself? No. It was unto the Lord for those of the future. That's what it was for. And I would dare say that ought to be our core goal with even working. I mean, look, we all like to have nice things and have a car that don't break down every time you leave the house, or tires that don't go flat at the worst possible times. But it's not what life's about. I mean, tires wear out. Cars wear out. Things don't hold together. Things burn up. I was out there this week, and we were working, and there's a guy up the road from where we're working, and he has a shop. And he works on cars and stuff. And it was towards the end of the day one day, and I seen this semi. It was a tractor. He was running bobtail, but he come up the gravel road, and he went up there to the shop. Well, that was on a Friday. I come back to work Monday, Tuesday, because Memorial Day was this past Monday. And the guy I'm working for, he said, "Did you hear about the excitement we had next door?" And I'm like, "No, what happened?" He goes, "Well, they pulled up there with that truck on Memorial Day, started it and pulled it up to the shop and got out to open the doors and went in there to get some stuff out of the way so he could pull it in the shop. And he said all of a sudden the horn started going off on the truck, and he turned around and looked, and it was sitting there engulfed in flames. And that truck sat right there and burnt to the ground. I mean, it's just a puddle on the ground by the time it was done, and I guess he didn't get to work on it in time. Something went wrong, and it burnt to the ground. Well, that was some guy's truck he made a living with. There it's gone. That happens. Be a shame if that was his treasure. I don't have enough time hardly to tell all my stories, but I know of another guy that I told you about. Did you hear me telling about that Tuesday night about my buddy down there in the Bluff? And he is an over-the-road trucker. He's worked super hard for a lot of years, really, really hard, made good money. So he decided he was going to buy him a new truck and have it built and really make it cool. And he spent his treasure on this truck. But he's going to work it, so it's okay. So we'll work it back out of it. Okay, takes off, 1,200 miles on the truck. The motor blew all to pieces in the truck. Brand new motor. Something from the factory that just didn't bolt something down inside the internal parts of the motor all the way like they're supposed to. And it come loose and blowed the block into 4 or 5 pieces, and just, that's the end. Got to put a new motor in this truck, had 1,200 miles on it. What? Well, that's what happens, because rust and moth doth corrupt. It surely does. Okay, so why? See, another thing is Proverbs makes several references also to the prudence of laying by for the future. For example, the story about the ant. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Why? Because she lays back for the winter. Grasshopper don't do that. The ant does. So why would Jesus point out and say it the way he did about not laying up treasures on earth? If it's so important and imperative, and honestly, it's our duty to work our life, to work all your life, and to pay for things, and for that to be such an essential part of our existence. Well, he said, first of all, lay not up for yourself. And that's the corner that gets turned. That's the transformation that starts to happen in the minds of people. They stop thinking about the future for others, and they only think about their own. What I want. My goals. Why do you think it happens that way in people who wind up divorced. What does most divorces happen over? It's not infidelity. It's money. It's money. Why? We don't have enough. No, usually they got an abundance of it. It's about what you think I should do with it and what I think you shouldn't do with it. And the next thing you know, they're bent out of shape with each other because this is my money and that's your money, and you want to blow your money on that, go ahead, but not my money. But wait, we're married, and so on and so forth, until it's an unreconcilable difference, as they say. Well, what inspired that? Well, it became self-centered. It became selfish. He said our labor should not be, he said, lay not up for yourself. Our labor should have a purpose. You know, it's why I've had a hard time through my life working just one job. Because after I stay in one place for too long, it starts to feel like there's no purpose for what I'm doing. I marvel sometimes at fellas that can go to a factory, the same factory, on the same line indefinitely, just for 30 years, 35 years, whatever, and just stand there and put the same thing in the same box 17 million times. And they just go to work and punch the clock and then do their time and punch back out and go back to their life. I've seen people where I don't understand how they do it. I've seen people that I admire that they can do it because they have been able to compartmentalize work away from life. So I guess it takes all kinds, but that's the only way I can imagine that you could make it work. I'm not that guy, I guess. I've just never been able, like, my labor, I feel like it ought to have some purpose. There ought to be something being accomplished by what I'm doing instead of it just feeling like I'm just like an ant just moving dirt for nothing. So I've worked a lot of different stuff through my life. Know how to do a lot of things because of it, but, work ought to have purpose. That's why things that have eternal value are so much more fulfilling for human beings, because there's purpose behind what you're doing. If you do something, and that's why he said laying up for yourself treasures in heaven, what's that mean? Can you send money to heaven? Well, no. Can you cash app money to St. Peter at the gate? No, you can't. I mean, that's not how it works. It's not that kind of treasure. Treasure in heaven. Well, you got to consider this. What is treasure for the believer? I've seen people stand up and say, Lord, I want to thank the Lord. He's blessed me with all this stuff. Has he really? I believe that the things that God gives us are a lot more basic and simple than what we give him credit for. Because it takes the monkey off of our back of our responsibility of what to do with the things he does actually give us. Did he give you that farm? No, but he gave me the breath to be able to work and make the money to buy the farm. Well, that's not an untrue statement. But was it his will for you to have the farm, or was that what you wanted? Was that your treasure that you were laying back here on this earth? Is it wrong to own a farm? Absolutely not. It's not. But if you lost that farm like Job lost everything he had, would you be able to feel the same way about that as Job did? See, treasure. Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. And that's where the delineation between treasures on earth and treasures in heaven becomes apparent in people's lives, in my life. Some people might consider me to be like a borderline hoarder of certain things. I don't like throwing away lumber. Well, there's a problem with that, because after you save little pieces of lumber for 5 or 6 years, you got to have a building to put all your firewood in, basically, because that's all it winds up being is firewood. Have any of y'all ever so many years just have a burning? I have many times. What do I burn? All the stuff I've been saving for 3 or 4 years. All the stuff that I said, man, That's a 2-foot long piece of car siding. Why would we throw that in the trash? I can do something with that. Yeah, you know what I'm going to do with it? I'm going to move it 700 times for the next 2 or 3 years, trip over it, watch it go bad, never use it, and then burn it someday. Why? Well, because I might be a little misdirected in the things that I put value on. That's the truth. Now, I'm talking to Seth now because I try not to look on Marketplace very often. Why? Because there's things on there that appeal to me, and they're cheap, and they're right here. And I've got a garage with some stuff in it that I have bought on Marketplace. Like, I don't know, I see this almost every day, and I think to myself, you big dummy, why did you buy that? It was $40, so I mean, it wasn't like I spent grocery money to buy this thing. But at the time, I had this little project going, and I had an idea that we might do with it instead of what we wound up doing with it, so what I bought this for, we didn't wind up using it. So now it just sits in my garage. But it's a little propane stovetop, a 3-burner stovetop with a working oven that came out of a camper. I paid $40 for it. And I thought it was cool, and I'm like, man, I can put this in the back of the trailer and we can have this little camper and da-da-da-da. I mean, like, I had this, harebrained idea, like this, this vision of what I thought we could do with it. And my biggest problem is when I need something, I usually can't find a good deal. So I have to pay full price for something that I am in desperate need of. And then when I do have a little extra, I can't never find a good deal. So it becomes more of an opportunity. See, you talk yourself into these things, and that's how you wind up putting the wrong kind of value on treasure. Because now I got a stove that sits in my garage, and the dirt daubers have really appreciated it, I'm sure. Will I ever use it? More than likely, not. What am I going to do with it? Probably give it away to somebody someday. And it's been taking up space in my garage for like 4 years now. Maybe 5. No, 4. About 4. No, 5. Because it was before we went in 20. So yeah, 5 years it's been sitting in my garage. You see my point? All right. The purpose for laboring shouldn't just be myself alone. It's all so temporal and so easily lost that it's foolish to put a whole lot of, you can't put eternal value on temporal things. You just can't. And you say, I'll leave it for my children. They don't want that junk. They don't. I mean, and the more and the longer it is for yourself, the more it becomes your treasure. That really is how it works. What turns these good things into actions that no longer serve the purposes that God intended them to be for us? In this matter of treasure and stuff. And what a treasure is. Well, obsession. I mean, I know people who fly RC airplanes. And they've spent every dime their poor family has on RC airplanes to travel around and fly their toys around at airports and stuff with other guys that's done the same thing. Their wife's working 2 jobs, try to keep the mortgage paid, and they're wasting all of their money on this nonsense. It's an obsession. It's their treasure, and they've become obsessed over it. People do this with, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. People do this with 1,000 different things. Obsession. Selfish gain. I mean, just like I said about becoming a millionaire, I know people who've had that goal. Grow up dirt poor and say, I'm going to be a millionaire by the time I'm 30. Just what's going to happen. And they've done anything they had to do to make it happen. Glory, pride, those kind of things can take these biblical principles that God provided for us to be able to enjoy life and to be able to put value on the right things. It turns it into a thing that's all about ourselves. Becoming so consumed by the treasure that you forget the purpose of the treasure. I mean, I heard a story one time. Matter of fact, I worked for a man and he had money, But he told me, he said, I didn't get this money by working for it. He said, I was an heir to I had a rich uncle. He said, the only thing is that nobody knew he was rich. Like, what do you mean? He's like, well, he had a good career, and he quit that to go be a farmer. He just wanted to be a farmer. And he said he lived his whole life, and he wore worn-out, ragged clothes, shoes with the soles flying. He said the last family reunion he came to, we all felt so bad for him. We all kind of secretly passed the hat and raised a couple $100 to give to him so he could just buy him some new clothes. We all felt that bad for him, sincerely. And he got offended and wouldn't take the money. And he died, and he was unbelievably wealthy. And he left all the money to this man and his sister. And he said, and so my point about that is this: how sad that man, he became obsessed with his treasure, that he forgot the purpose of what the treasure was for. Now, in the end, I guess leaving it to somebody beyond him showed a little bit of insight, but I mean, they said we never seen him. He was just an odd duck. He didn't have friends. He didn't visit with nobody. He was just, he's just a loner. Don't forget the reason why there's treasure. When anything becomes or gets made into the most important thing in your life and replaces the most important things in life, you might have made it your treasure. Might have made it your treasure. Treasures in heaven will never replace the purpose of biblical principles that God has laid out for us to live on this earth. They'll never conflict with each other is what I'm saying, okay? Family, the things that God has actually given us are treasures. Your family, your kids are the only thing you'll take to heaven with you someday. It's the only thing you'll see in heaven that you had here. Seems like that'd be awful important to try to preserve, for sure. A goodly heritage, you can make a treasure out of that and it not be what you think it is. You can become so obsessed with that you forget what the treasure's for and lose your whole family and still think you gave them a goodly heritage. An inheritance, the Bible in Proverbs talks about how a righteous man leaveth something for his kids. And that don't necessarily mean money, but it says inheritance. It's something intentionally left on purpose for your posterity instead of just a memory. Unity. These are things that we ought to treasure. Unity in a family. It's the saddest thing when your family they're not united. It's a tragedy because most of the time it never gets fixed because most of the people involved don't want to fix it. We ought to treasure things like that. Where your treasure is, that's where your heart will be, and where your heart is, that's what you'll spend your life and your efforts doing. Lay not up for yourselves treasures on this earth, but rather lay up treasures in heaven. That's what we ought to do.